Okay, we're going to go ahead and start with our second panel of the day. It's going to be on the census. It's going to be called We Count Too, a look at the 2020 census, and we're going to sort of look at the different issues that are facing not only our community but all people of color in this census under the Trump administration, which will be coming up in about 2 years. First, I'd like to introduce our first panelist, Nahla Kayali. She is the founder and executive director of Access of Southern California, a culturally and linguistically competent health and human services nonprofit organizations in Anaheim dedicated to empowering all underserved populations with a focus on Arab Americans and Muslim American communities. Under Nahla's executive leadership, Access Cal has grown from a budget of $2,000 to a budget of $1.9 million, serving an estimated 10,000 underserved clients and providing over 55,000 services annually. Access Cal's programs include case management and advocacy, healthcare access services, employment of tax services, counseling and support services, financial assistance services, educational services, citizenship and immigration services, and community services, and civic and engagement and refugee services. Nahla was a 2014 recipient of the Champion of Change Award from the White House, and I think that she's very well known in this community for all her work and her great actions. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Nahla for the first panelist.
Thank you, Samer, for the introductions. Good morning. Thank you for the wonderful ADC organization for inviting me and be here to speak on a very important topic for United States and for our community especially.
Just talk a little louder.
Okay. It is a crucial topic, and what is the census, and should I? Yeah. Okay. So what is the census, and why the census is important to the Arab American community, and how it does affect us? Well, the U.S. Census Bureau main jobs is to count its population every 10 years. And it is mandated by the U.S. Constitution for America to collect data to determine, number one, the seats of each state for the House of Representatives and distribute federal funds to every state. The U.S. Census Bureau protects all information, and they will never share this information with any government or court. So it is very important for us to get very close to the counted number as much as we can. If numbers are not counted correctly, we lose U.S. representative seats in our state, and it happened to California in the past. And then we receive less funding from federal to the state. For every person is not counted, the state loses about $2,000 annually. For 10 years, they lose $20,000 per person. So imagine if 1,000 people are not counted, the state will lose almost $2 million for services, for resources to our state. And that is public work, schools, hospitals, programs for low-income community. And I'm sure a lot of people here in the room, they say, well, we don't need programs. But I'm sure each and every one of us, we know one person can benefit from programs for low-income community. And I know you know at least one probably homeless or refugees, of asylum seekers, or needy people with mental illnesses that they will benefit from services and programs. Our Arab community came to this country long time ago, and they came for a different reason. They came for better life, open businesses, get educated, and they came to have a great life and luxury. But however, now the situation is completely different with our community. They come, unfortunately, in a different status. They come as refugees, they come as asylum seekers, TPS, they come with no income. They are completely vulnerable. And that's why we really need to be counted here. They come seeking safety, number one. As an Arab community, we are obligated to fulfill out our obligation toward our constitutions and to fill out the census form. We need to do our most becoming contributing citizen to the society here. We are choosing to live in America, to strive the American dream. We are choosing to become part of the American fabric. We are choosing to build home for ourselves and our families. We are an amazing community. We established organizations, businesses, and we become educated here, taking jobs, and we are obligated to give back to this country and observe our constitutions. When we respond to the census forms, we are showing our existence. We are here in this great nation to call it home, which we have a voice, and we should count it ourselves. We are showing that we have the right to have access to resources and programs, just like any other groups. The government agencies, they use data from the census to build schools, hospitals, roads, public work, programs for low-income community. The business community, they use the data to decide where to build factories, businesses, offices, stores. Our nonprofits, they use the data just like ADC, Access Cal, Arab American Institute, CARE, to use the data to develop programs and implement programs and to access data applying for funding. This is why it is crucial for us to fill out the census form as complete as possible. I know right now we are hearing about the citizenship questions on the forms. It's bringing fears to our community, to the Arab community, to the Muslim community, and to other immigrant community. We live in a climate right now, it's the travel ban, the Muslim ban, ending DACA, the public charge. This question can really bring fear to the community. However, we still need to educate the community to fill the census forms, and we encourage them to fill it out. But while we are doing this, as a community, we have responsibility to advocate and collaborate with other organizations to ask the questions to be removed from the census forms, so community can feel safe. And remember, the Census Bureau, they don't share your information with any other government agencies or court. As an Arab American, we have classified as white. We don't have any data on us. If they say 70% they have cancer, we are classified in the 70%. We don't have any data. And for that, it does prevent us from applying for funding. So we really need to ask for our own category. And I know we collaborated recently and in the past with ADC, Arab American Institute, Access Michigan, and other organization. Access Cal took a stand with all these amazing organizations to establish the MENA category, which is North Africa, Middle East and North Africa. But again, the US Census Bureau denied this request for 2020 census. But we must keep our advocacy and to have our categories. And if we become recognized as minorities, or we have our own categories, we can be able to have other resources coming toward our community. Right now, we have been encouraged for the Arab American to check other and put Arab. We need to collect Arabic-speaking community to know if we can be able to have some data on us. And we failed on many different funding because we're not categorized in the census and we can't find any information about the Arab American community. By indicating how many Arab Americans counted, we are officially showing our presence and we become grounded in this root of the nations. The doors will open for our community with public officials, and we will be recognized as a community, and they will come to us instead us going to them when we have a good number for our community. Every organization, they're taking a stand and a role of providing a lot of information. At Access California Services, we've been recognized in the United States Census Bureau 2000, 2010, and now we're working very closely with them for the 2020. I also was appointed by Governor Schwarzenegger at the time to serve on the Complete Count Committee for the Arab community 10 years ago. Access Cal is heavily involved with the census and other government agency, and we are known as a trusted agency. And we built a great name and reputation with our community to be able to help them. It's been 20 years that we have really been serving the community, and they trust us with any message that we send out. We understand the culture, we speak the language, we know where to meet them, where they congregate, where they play, where they socialize, so we understand our community the best. So Access Cal supports our community to providing education. Our door will be open to help the community and every community member to come and fill out the form at our office. And this will be the third time that we are engaging with the census, the U.S. Census Bureau. We received many support from government agencies because we are a trusted agency. We received funding from, of course, the Census Bureau, Affordable Care Act. We were a leading agency here in the state of California, the USCIS. So they always trust us as providing the education, the outreach, and implementing program for our Arab American community. So this time we are taking another great part to continue the education and the outreach to our community. It is only through our actions, all of us together, and we will be able to make a change in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Nahla. Our next speaker is Mr. Arturo Vargas. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials, NALEO Educational Fund, a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that strengthens American democracy by promoting the full participation of Latinos in civic life. He serves as the CEO of NALEO, an affiliated national membership organization of Latino policymakers and their supporters. Arturo has held the position since 1994. Prior to joining NALEO, Arturo held various positions at the Mexican-American Legal Defense and Educational Funds, which is also known as MALDEF. Arturo is a nationally recognized expert in Latino democratic trends, electoral participation, voting rights, the census, and redistricting. Arturo holds a master's degree in education and a bachelor's degree in history and Spanish from Stanford University. He's also from the Los Angeles area, and he was born in Texas, El Paso, Texas. NALEO and Arturo has been probably one of our major partners with the ADC and with the Arab American community in working on the census issue and trying to get a fair and accurate count. So with that, I would like to turn the mic over to Arturo.
Thank you, Samer. Thank you. And as we say in California, buenos dias. Thank you, Samer, for that introduction. What you really need to know is that I'm Samer's friend. And we have spent the past several years working together on this very important issue of the 2020 census. You know, as Samer mentioned, I've been working on this issue for a number of years. This is now my 4th census. Okay, we do this every 10 years. I'm old. I've been around a long time. I worked on the 1990 census, and the 2000 census, the 2010 census, and for the past 10 years, I've had a front row seat watching the Census Bureau prepare for Census 2020. And I can tell you honestly, this is the census that I am most concerned about. I believe that a train wreck has already happened called the 2020 census. It's coming down the rails, and it's on track to undercount the communities we care about, and we have to do something about it. Now, as Nala said, this is required by the Constitution. This is the way we govern ourselves in the United States. It's foundational to our democracy. And if we don't participate, we give up power. Remember when this country was started, there were 13 colonies, right? They became 13 states. I used to be a history teacher, so bear with me. 13 colonies, 13 states. They had to figure out how they were going to govern themselves. So they agreed on a couple of compromises. Compromise number 1, each state will get 2 senators. And then each state will get members of Congress according to how many people they had. And the only way to figure that out is to count the people. So that's why we do a census. But the census also was born in the racism of this country. When the census was established, if you were from Africa and a slave, you were not considered a full person. The compromise was between the North and the South was that slaves would only be counted as 3/5 of a human being. That's our history. That was corrected by the 14th Amendment. And today the Constitution says that there shall be an enumeration of all persons. It doesn't say all white people. It doesn't say all men. It doesn't say all voters. It doesn't say all adults. It doesn't say all citizens. It says all persons. This is fundamental to our civil rights. This is the only thing that the federal government does in which everybody is truly equal and only counts as one. Whether you're a transgender homeless youth or a multimillionaire, you count equal if you're counted. So what is at stake here? As Nala mentioned, it's funding. But not just for social service programs. It's for everything the federal government does practically. The biggest program that the federal government administers that uses census data is Medicaid. And then it's education. And then it's transportation funds. I just drove here from LA. I care about those transportation funds coming to California because we need to fix our roads. And if that's going to happen, it's only if every Californian gets counted. That's how essential it is. And it's about distributing political power. So at its core, the census is about 2 things, and never forget this. It's about power, and it's about money. It's about who has it, who deserves it, and who gets it. And it all depends on who gets counted or who gets missed. That's what's at stake here. Now, the census has never been accurate. Never, ever in the history of this country has the Census Bureau counted every single person. In fact, in the first census in 1790, George Washington didn't believe the numbers because he thought there were more people in the 13 colonies, 13 states, than were counted in 1790. He thought there was an undercount then. Well, there has always been an undercount of certain populations. And which populations are those? They're not the rich. They're not the people who have 2 houses. They're people who are poor, people who don't speak English, people who are immigrants, children, African Americans, Latinos,
Homeless.
Arab Americans. So our communities have been shortchanged for the entire history of the United States of our fair share of political power and resources. So we have to do something about it, which is why we care so much about getting an accurate count. So now here we come to the next census, 2020. The second thing, well, third thing now I'd like you to take home. 1, all persons. 2, it's about power and money. 3, this is not the census that the Census Bureau has been planning for the past 10 years. We need to understand that. The people at the Census Bureau are good people. They're nerds. They're demographers. They're researchers. You know, their career people are really good people. They have been planning to try to do a high-tech census to make it more efficient, less costly, and more accurate. And their efforts are being sabotaged by Congress and the administration, to the point now that what will happen in 2020 is not the operation that the Bureau has been planning for the past 10 years. And how is that? Number 1, lack of funding. For the past 4 years, the Congress has not given the Census Bureau the money it needed to plan, to test, to prepare for 2020. As a consequence, the Bureau had to slow down some of its plans, had to scale down some of its ideas, or cancel some of its elements of what it wanted to do for 2020 because of lack of funding. And that's on Congress. Number 2, for the past 10 years, the Census Bureau has been studying how do we collect better information about how people in this country identify racially and ethnically. Because the way it does it now, with 2 questions, are you Latino, yes or no, and then the next question, what is your race, doesn't work. It doesn't work in collecting data, accurate data, about race and ethnicity in this country, and the Bureau knows that. So for the past 10 years, they have been studying how do we fix this? And they invested millions and millions in years of research. And they recommended all the career professionals a new question that we called the combined question, where basically the question asks, how does this person identify? And then it was in order of the size of the population groups. First option, white. Second option, Latino, because Latinos are the second largest population group in the state, in the country. And then African American, then Native Hawaiian, Native Alaskan, and then a new MENA category, which I'm sure Samer will talk about. And then at the end, at the bottom, some other race. That was what the Bureau wanted. The administration put the kibosh on it with no explanation whatsoever. So now the Bureau has to go back and ask all of us to identify ethnically and racially using 2 questions that don't work. So we need to understand that structure and educate our communities so that they know how to answer it. It's a big problem for Latinos because the first question, are you Latino, yes or no, there are 4 boxes. Yes, I am Latino. No, I am Latino. So then you go to the next question. But if you mark yes, you can mark I'm Mexican American, I'm Puerto Rican, I'm Cuban, or I'm other Hispanic. And then on other Hispanic, I have to write in Salvadoran, Dominican, or whatever. Then once I do that, I go to the next question that says, what is this person's race? The problem with that is for Latinos, and I'm sure for many people in this room, they look at that and say, what are you talking about? I just told you my race. I told you I'm Mexican. And the Bureau says, no, being Mexican is an ethnicity. It's not a race. Now tell me what your race is. And so Latinos look at the options, white, black, Asian, Native Hawaiian, Native Alaskan, some other race. And so they end up saying, well, I must be some other race. And they check some other race. And then they write in Aztec, Aztlan, Raza, Chicano, Mexican. That's a joke. So about 40% of Latinos check some other race. The problem with that is that the government says there's no such thing as some other race. No such thing. Yet here, 20 million Latinos say they are some other race. So what does this government do? They go back and then they impute racial data for those people. And that's what's going to have to happen in 2020. So we need to educate our communities that if they, for Latinos, we're in a good position because we have that Latino question. So I want to make sure that all Latinos check Latinos. The Census Bureau will tell you, as Arabs, you got to check white and then write in your Arab background. I'll let Samer get more into that. And that's what we're going to have to deal with because the administration has not allowed the Census Bureau to proceed with research-based improvements to the census. Then the third big thing that you all have heard about is that the Secretary of Commerce has ordered a question on citizenship to be added to the 2020 Census questionnaire. There are 6 lawsuits pending right now to try to remove this question. 2 in New York, 2 in Maryland, 2 here in California. All of them arguing that the Secretary did not follow proper procedure in the Administrative Procedures Act, federal law, of how these changes are made, that he did it for political motivation, and that there was even probably some motivation aimed at harming immigrant groups. Well, guess what? There's a process in litigation called discovery, where lawyers have to force information from the people they are suing to find out what's really happening. And in the course of discovery, we have learned, as recently as just yesterday, that Secretary Ross was having these conversations about adding a citizenship question when he first got sworn in with people in the White House, like Steve Bannon and Chris Kobach, the Secretary of State of Kansas, who is famously known for pushing voter ID laws. He was the one who was saying, we need a citizenship question. And why? In an environment where a federal government is canceling DACA, canceling TPS, changing the public charge rule, talking about building a border wall, and then they're going to ask you, are you a citizen? What is that going to do to our communities? Scare us away.
Fear.
You know, I've come to the conclusion that this administration is trying to reduce the number of Latinos in this country through immigration policies, through all these policies I talked about. And what better way to make people disappear than not to count them? I say we can't let this happen. This is our right to be counted. This is how we get political power. This is how our community get resources. This is what we deserve because we pay taxes. And if we allow this census to fail, for 10 years, we're going to deny our communities their true share of political representation and resources. And there's a lot at stake, and people are very, very scared. We have done focus groups and surveys to try to figure out how do we explain this to our community. People who are legitimately scared to open their door to government officials. How do we explain to them that the census is so important that they need to overcome their fear and participate? We tested 4 messages to try to see what may work. We tested a message that the census is required by the Constitution. We tested a message that the census is your civic duty as an American. We tested a message that the census benefits your community in all the ways Nala described. And then we tested a resistance message, that this is your way to stand up to what's happening in this country by being counted. Well, that message worked the least. The message that worked the best was that the census is important for your community. And this research was done after the citizenship question was added in the spring. So what we are doing now is that we are preparing an outreach campaign, a public education campaign in the Latino community, just to explain to people the importance of the census for community benefit. And then we'll come back in 2020, and then with a different message about how to fill out your form and how to participate. This is the biggest challenge we've ever had. This is the biggest lift that we'll ever have in motivating our community to take action on something. But the stakes are so high, and this is so much to the core of who we are as a nation, that as Americans that we are, we need to stand up for the Constitution and not allow it to be taken away from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Arturo. All right, I'm going to just talk for a few minutes, and then we're going to open up the floor for some discussion and questions. But I want to try something, and hopefully this will not start a fight or an argument, which is not a given in our community. But show of hands, I want to know how many people in this audience would self-identify themselves as Arab Americans. Okay. Now, how many would self-identify as Middle Eastern or North African? Okay. Now, this is the trickier question, and this has been a big debate within our community. How many in this room would classify or identify themselves as white? No, now, I'm not saying forced. I mean, would you self-describe yourself as white, Caucasian?
No, if given no other choices.
No. I'm saying right now.
Given other choices, no.
Okay. Because the reason why I say this is because, going back to a little bit of a history lesson, back at the turn of the century, there was what's called the Asian Exclusion Act. And what that said was that Asians were barred from becoming citizens. And what people do not realize or understand, that Asians were actually the last people to get the right to vote. African Americans and women were allowed to vote before Asians. So what ended up happening was there was a big confusion among the government as to how to classify people from the Middle East, people from the Arab world. And also India. In India. The people from the Arab world, there was a movement at that time to classify them as Asians. After all, hey, they looked on a map, they saw Syria, and they say, that's Asia. And they tried to sort of classify us as Asian. What that would have done was barred us from being U.S. citizens. Okay? So there was some lawsuits going back and forth, and one lawsuit that we ended up winning, and the way we were able to win that, by arguing that, no, we are in fact white. Okay? So this whole mess, unfortunately, was some of our own doing, because at the time, the people there felt that was the best way to go, because they were fearful of losing their right to vote and their citizenship. Ever since then, the OMB, Office of Management and Budget, OMB basically sets forth the minimum standards of all government agencies, and they came out with a declaration, and they said that Arabs are defined as Caucasian or white. Okay, and I believe so are Latinos. Is that for the most part? How is?
They make a distinction that being Latino is an ethnicity, but you also need to have a race. Mm-hmm. And that's where the confusion comes in.
So with us, no matter if you come from Sudan, you are white. In fact, there was somewhat of a famous case involving a Nubian from Egypt who was trying to get set-aside contracts through the SBA Small Business Administration. And he marked down that he was African, that he was Arab and African. He was denied because he identified himself as Arab. And they told him he was white, Caucasian. He says, but look at me. What do you mean I'm white and Caucasian? They said, no, I'm sorry. You identified yourself as Arab. You're not entitled to it. So this is sort of the absurdity of where we're at right now. So for decades, us, and along with other Arab American organizations, have been fighting, arguing, cajoling, whatever, begging to be identified in the census and to be identified as Arab Americans. Each time we kept falling short. Some of it was our own fault because we as a community, they kept saying, could not identify ourselves as a specific category. We had people said, no, we're Middle Eastern. We had people no said we're Phoenicians. No, we're North Africa. They kept saying, you cannot self-identify. So we said, fine. For this census, we came up with a compromise. That compromise is we'll call ourselves MENA, Middle East, North Africa. So we'll go by a geographical designation. How can you argue from that? If you're Lebanese and you think you're Phoenician, well, you're from the Middle East, so what are you going to say? Right? If you're Chaldean or from Iraq, again, you're in the Middle East. So this, for the first time, sort of brought everybody together. Under one umbrella, under one designation, kumbaya, we're all going to go forward together as one. And it was going great. The census people were buying into it. In 2015, there was a trial, and they tried the MENA category and the MENA question under their combined race and ethnicity question. And their finding was that the most accurate way to count our community was, in fact, to use a MENA category. And that's what the census is all about, accuracy and fairness. And they said this is the most accurate, most fairest way to do the census is by including a MENA category. That was great. We were like 90% there. But I'm a big baseball fan, and you know, baseball people are big into jinxes. So we say, never say the famous last words. And sure enough, it happened. The Trump administration happened. Mm-hmm. We went from rising on top of the world saying, wow, we're finally going to get this. It's here. To, oh my God, Donald Trump is issuing a ban. Donald Trump is profiling Arabs. Now we started questioning, do we even want a MENA category? Do we even want to have the government know who we are and have our addresses? Okay? That was the big question. And the way I felt was, hey, look, we fought too hard to get this on the census. Let's get it on. Get it there. At least we won't have to fight anymore for next year. But at least when next time in 2030, when Donald Trump will not be president. Okay? Let's get it on, and then people will have the option. If they don't want to answer the question, they don't have to answer that question. But at least they'll fill out the census, and we'll have the question. It's a done deal. Well, unfortunately, that decision was taken out of our hands. Because the census came back and said, nah, we're not going to change. We're going to leave it as is. And we tried to get them to sort of declare a MENA category within the race category. Because now they're going to go back to a two question. You know what they said to us? They said, your community can't even decide whether you're a race and ethnicity. We have people from your community that say you're a white. And we have people from your community say that you're not white. So to them, to census, and this has been historically accurate for ever since we've been working on this issue, if there's any indecisiveness, they will say no. And that's what they did. So we will not be counted. Now, again, you could put other race. You could put Lebanese, Syrian, Algerian, Tunisian. But guess what will happen? The Census Department will say, well, that's nice. You consider yourself Syrian. That's okay. Too bad, you're white. And they put you back and re-impute you into the white category. Okay? That's essentially where we're at right now. Now, Arturo talked about the citizenship question and the lawsuits that are going on there. ADC is actually a plaintiff and co-counsel to one of the New York cases right now. Us, along with the ACLU, have partnered up with several other organizations, and we were one of the people that filed the lawsuits that's now seeking to depose Secretary Ross. And in fact, the decision is going before the Supreme Court whether or not he's going to be deposed. And we're going to try to pry out the answers why this question is on there all of a sudden. What AAI and what ADC has also done is we've partnered up with the Arab American Institute, and we have commissioned a study of the Arab American community to see where we kind of self-identify ourselves. And we have done focus groups, and we've done polls across the country. They're all done, but we're sort of right now, the poll and the study was done by Zugby Analyticals, by John Zugby. So right now they're in the process of analyzing everything and writing the report. But I'm going to give you some preliminary numbers that I think are somewhat interesting. And that is about 60% of those that polled among the Arab American community were worried about giving their personal information about themselves and their family members. Now, the interesting part here was 62% of the U.S.-born Arab Americans had concerns, while only 45% of the foreign-born were concerned. And this is interesting. Do you know why? Because a lot of these people had come through the immigration process, well, they have everything on me that they need anyway. I had to go through all this vetting just to get into this country. And the other thing is, some of these people are coming from very authoritarian regimes. You know, the Mukhabarat, the secret police. They said, I don't understand. We do this happens all the time to us. This is usual. So that's sort of interesting there in itself. 2/3, about 70%, said that they were concerned about the online security. Because mind you, this is a way to save money. The census this year is going online. They're pushing a lot of people to answer the questions online. So there is this concern, again, not just in our community, but across the spectrum of you know, will my data be secured? Will somebody hack it? Will the Chinese or the Russians get a hold of this? Well, they're going to have it anyway. Approximately almost half of the people sampled were concerned about immigration and enforcement, that this was going to be used as a means to enforce immigration. Half expressed concern that the government would use the information because they are Arab Americans. About 55% said that they were fearful that this would be used to profile Arab Americans. This is more than half of the people. Now, the ultimate question, will you fill out the census? And approximately 40% said, well, it said either they're not sure or no. Now, statistically speaking, that's a very significant number. Okay? That means if there are 1 million of us here, we'll only show up at 600,000. Now, we know that there's at least, depending on what number you use and who you look to, anywhere from 3 to 6 million of Arab Americans. Now, consider that if 40% of them did or did not, and how huge of a swing that is. And for us, we think, I mean, it's obvious, this is the motivation behind the Trump administration. To get as many brown people as they can not to fill out the census, so that they can legally ignore us and disenfranchise us. Now, again, the positive that's coming out of this is that we've been sort of working with a lot of other organizations across what everybody realizes what is at stake right now, whether they're Latino, whether they're African Americans, Arabs, gay and lesbian, transgender. We're all coming together and with a combined voice to sort of fight this. So I think with that, I just sort of want to open up the floor to any questions if anybody has them or comments. Do we have the mic? Where's the? No, there was the. Where is it? Oh, I do. Well, it's all mine. All right, so I'm going to, Dalal, will you please do the honors of doing the cordless mic? Again, I would ask everybody to be cognizant and respectful of our time and your time. We ask that you ask a question and keep it short, please. share if I have to.
Yeah, we have 3.
Yeah, Samer, what sort of coalitions are you doing with African Americans, Latinos specifically? I heard some, as well as LGBT.
Well,
Cute.
I guess I can answer a little bit. I think Arturo can also answer this because
Okay, that's
basically
fine.
we're part of the same coalition, and that is we're part of the Census Task Force under the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, which encompasses pretty much all of the national civil rights organizations, including African Americans, Latinos, gay and lesbian, transgender communities, stuff like that. Arturo, I don't know if you want to add to that.
This, the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights is a national coalition organization, and NALEO and Asian Americans Advancing Justice are co-chairs of the task force on the census. And we have been preparing for 2020 since 2010. And that coalition now has grown. It includes ADC, it includes the National Urban League, that's the principal African American organization. The LGBT Task Force is the principal gay and lesbian organization at the table, and all of us are working together to understand how do we message to our respective communities, how do we coordinate our efforts, because resources are scarce. So we want to make sure that we don't recreate the wheels, and if we create good tools that we can share them among each other, share our findings from our respective research so that we could be as effective and efficient as possible.
Yes. So, for example, when we go to the Hill to advocate, we're actually going together. So there'll be meetings I'll set up, and I'll invite the entire coalition, and then there'll be times where I'll be invited to a coalition meeting. So it's been a very sort of unifying effort.
Be a representative from the LGBT.
Mm-hmm.
Of course. No, of course. Yeah. Dalal?
Thank you. Is it possible to defeat the white listing by suggesting through the coalition that we always choose other and then put MENA? If we do that, they cannot reorganize MENA as white because by definition it doesn't fit them. So if you put Lebanese or Palestinian or Jordanian, they're going to put it as white. But can we advise and start a campaign, Latinos, and I mean Asian Americans, Arabs, start a campaign telling all our community, choose other in the census and put MENA as a...
So this is what happens to the other category. There are other people that use the other race category. Latinos use it, Arab Americans use it, and the Jewish community also uses it because the census is not allowed to ask about religion. So a lot of people within the Jewish American community will mark other race and then they'll put Jewish American. Guess what happens to anybody that doesn't fit any definition? They just lump them all together and just say, other category.
What do they do with the Jewish Americans? Do they put them as white?
No, they just lump them together as other category. So everybody gets lumped into that other category. If they can re-categorize them, they will. If they can't, they just mark them as other race. They don't. That's what I'm saying. They just there's a category that says other. So you're not subdivided out of that. You get lumped into just the other. It counts, but it's when you run your statistics and you category, it'll come up as simply as other race.
Right.
So you're not going to be able to differentiate, well, is that other race? What is that other race? Was that somebody who marked as Arab American? Somebody marked as Jewish American? What was that?
Before when we try to register people, and I'll commit to the 32nd, they would say, I won't register because they're going to call me for jury duty. Now they're saying, I'm not going to characterize myself as an Arab American because they'll profile me. Well, they know where we are in this artificial intelligence life. They know where we are. So I think, are we doing any awareness campaigns that this is not true?
That's one thing we were doing with this study, to find out what we need to focus on within the community? What are the message? Arturo spoke about this when they did it to the Latino community. We're also doing this. What messaging works? What are the fears? What are the issues that people are raising as to why okay, first, are you going to fill it out? And if you're not, why aren't you? But when we see what their purposes are, what the reasonings are, we're then going to try to kind of target those areas in our campaign. And we're gonna sort of do a unified, nationwide strategy that we're going to then offer up to any and all organizations that want to go ahead and use the material.
I can answer this question. Here in California, our Governor Brown, is meeting with a lot of different communities, and we have a coalition right now. We had already a couple of meetings just to identify the trusted messengers for funding in 2019. And California is taking a lead of starting early for the education, because they want to make sure California, we have the fair share of being counted, because we're a big state, and because of funding for the state, and that's what they're trying from the federal government, maybe the new administration, is to kill California in a way. But our governor allocated almost $90 million for outreach and education for the community.
Yeah, it's the highest out of any other state. California. So far.
And we already had a couple of meetings so far.
Now, when you say community, you mean
Arab American, Latinos, Asians, and they're choosing the trusted messengers who will be getting the funding to educate the community.
Yes, my name is Shafiq Al-Gumai, and I'm just going to say why we don't hold just the Arab Americans. That's how we are. We are Arab Americans, and we can insist in putting this Arab Americans category.
Yeah.
And also, I agree with the lady. Thank you. That we should advocate that we should just do our census, because everybody knows about every one of us. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, that sort of point was also raised by a lot of the younger people who are big into the computers and stuff. They're like, well, I'm already my information is already out there in the ether world. What does it matter? But we've tried for decades, and our preference is Arab Americans. However, the census has used our division, especially with a lot of the minority communities in the Middle East, to sort of fight against that and say, well, you can't agree, therefore you don't get it. So, but that is our preference. That is our preference.
Hi. Thank you, Samir, and thank you for the panel. I have a question about Be Count Me Michigan 2020. So it seems like the civil society in Michigan found an alternative and is coming together to do their own count. Is that a possibility across states to do something like that?
Are you sure it's their own count, or is it an effort to make sure people get counted in 2020?
I'm not sure. That's what I'm asking. I saw
it,
but I'm not sure about it.
I'm pretty sure it's similar to what's happening in California, where at a state level, they're trying to organize all the leaders and community leaders so that Michigan can do its own effort to complement what the Census Bureau is doing. Yeah.
I can answer to that question. We have a coalition here, Anaheim, Fullerton, North Orange County. They had a coalition to start on the census, and they already got numbers. So they are preparing the community for the upcoming census, and they already have numbers and statistics for it.
My question is this. You indicated that you've made some legal moves to challenge the administration's effort to derail 2020 census. However, don't you think that this is futile under the circumstances unless there's a drastic change? And do you expect that the upcoming congressional elections will make any difference in terms of altering your effort towards making sure that the 2020 census is done the proper way? I mean, is this variable key variable in altering the way you handle this issue?
We have to use every single resource at our disposal. We have to use the courts, we have to use public opinion, we have to use elections. If Congress were to switch parties, either the House, the Senate, or both, that would give us another opportunity to try to force removal of the citizenship question through legislation. So the elections on November 6th are going to be very important in that regard, absolutely.
Regarding the lawsuit, because again, like I said, we're one of the plaintiffs and we're one of the co-counsels on that. One of the things we're claiming here is that this was an illegal or unconstitutional attempt to disenfranchise minority voters, one. Two, and to sort of make it cut the funding, the appropriate and fair amount of funding that's going to be allocated to minority organizations and to minority communities. Secretary Ross stated that the reason for his inclusion of the citizenship question is because the Department of Justice asked them to do it so that they can use that to better enforce civil rights in this country. Yes, the Trump administration is claiming that they want to enforce civil rights laws in this country. Now, one thing I want to point out, the Census Bureau is excruciatingly slow. They will study and look at and put out samples of where to put periods and commas. Okay? I told you, it has taken us decades to get where we are right now, even for the MENA. Now, all of a sudden, in about a few month period, they've decided to kind of throw in this citizenship question without testing it. That's the biggest issue. The Census Bureau putting a question out without actually testing it multiple times, it's unheard of. So what is the real reason here? And that's what we're trying, and we're saying the real reason is because they want to discriminate against people of color. So that's essentially what it is. You know, the courts, we don't know. If we do win, we're certain this is going to go up to the Supreme Court, and we're the current makeup, but we have to try.
Hi, my name is Widad Saleh Shlota, American Iraqi. To increase the voter participation, besides doing complete census, is do same-day registration. European countries have implemented that. Colorado has implemented the same-day registration to include everybody and not to disenfranchise those underprivileged people, and have overcome the logistics element about implementing same-day registration by increasing the polling places in different neighborhoods instead of just one location, which is the registrar of voters, as we have now in San Diego. So have you been working ahead of time? Have you thought of contacting voter registration to implement same-day registration in different neighborhoods? Thank you.
I can tell you the ADC has always been pushing on voter rights and making sure that everybody has the opportunity to vote. We have sort of pushed a lot of voter reform initiatives around the country. Same-day registration is one of them, among other various other ones too. And you know, the way this country works, unfortunately, is that each state has the ability or the right to set its own rules for voting, as long as they don't violate the Constitution. And what we've seen is a trend, especially in the so-called red states, of going the opposite direction, of them making it more difficult for people to vote, including voter roll purges, shutting down polling places, voter ID laws. I think one of the most egregious is Alabama, where they instituted a voter ID law and then turned around and shut down all the motor vehicle offices in what they call the Black Belt, or the African American regions. So if you're an African American and you want to vote, you need to get a driver's license, and it may take you an hour's drive just to get to the DMV. And we know how long those DMV lines can be with a normal situation. And oh, by the way, you have to pay for it too. So it tantamounts to a poll tax as well. I don't know. Did you?
Yeah. There are many reforms that we're advocating for, and in fact, in California, we're very fortunate to have a very reform-minded Secretary of State. Over the past 3 years, we've instituted the ability for 16 and 17-year-olds to pre-register to vote, so that the minute they're 18, they can vote because they're already registered. There's automatic, well, it's not automatic registration, but more streamlined motor voter policies that have been implemented, and more vote-by-mail opportunities, so that everybody who's registered gets the ballot in the mail. Whether or not you decide to vote, that's up to you, but you get the ballot if you're registered. You don't have to go to a polling location. You can go to a polling location to fill it out and to return it, or you can return it by mail. So those are some of the reforms that we're pushing. Some of them started in Colorado, others in Oregon. But these are states where we want to get more people to vote. But there are other states where they want to keep certain people from voting. And they're doing that through voter ID laws, proof of citizenship laws, cutting down early voting days, lots of tactics to make it more difficult for people to vote.
Any other questions?
Yes, I'm Hanan Nassar from California. I appreciate what you're all doing and all what you have accomplished and everything. However, I feel like we're always giving in. Okay, we don't stick by what we want. The Israelis never give in. They stick by what they want and they get it. And as an Arab, Middle East is not really used, it's not accepted by a lot of academics and all that. We don't consider Middle East because it includes a lot of others, okay? Arab Americans would be the most likely thing, and we should stick by it and not give in to what the Americans want or the census want or anything, and we should really work toward it, I think.
Again, I don't disagree with you. The way this is a sort of a battle that the ADC is not doing alone. So we kind of work by consensus. Well, that's the idea of the education. That's where we have to come in. Look, I understand and I agree with you. The way also that we look at it sometimes is getting the toe in the door. Okay, the old adage of the camel getting the head in first, then, so that's the idea. So at least it's a process. We get on, and then we can continue sort of moving towards it. It is not the best. It is not, but at this point, we're desperate in ensuring that our communities counted somehow. Now, again, there is another way of doing this, because once you're in the MENA category, that you mark, what would have happened had we done this, you would have been marked MENA, and then you would have been able to identify yourself specifically. Are you Iraqi? Are you Tunisian? Are you, Palestinian? Turkish, actually, Turkish would, according to the census, would not have fallen under the MENA category. Iranians would have. Okay? So, were considered to be part of the Middle East. Now, understand. I understand that. But what I'm saying is, let me just finish this. So what happens here is when you try to do a search and you want statistical data on certain subcategories, you could mark in, I want all the numbers for everyone that's identified themselves as, and you can list all the Arab countries. And in essence, you will get that information. The census is about the information too. I totally agree with you. We need to be listed as Arab Americans. But we also take a practical look at this and say, let's at least first get counted, and then we will try to get something else. Well, let me just, all individuals, according to the census, will be asked to sort of self-identify themselves along. No, but they will. Well, they will. They were going to put the top 6 largest populations. Again, and then it's also about education. We would have had to have gone. But look, the bottom line is, this is the bottom line. Okay, it's not going to be on there. So we can sit here and argue all we want. Arab, MENA, whatever. They don't care. Okay, so let's have this. Let's find what we need to talk about. Okay. Gotcha.
This نبيل كيلاني
we'll come. She's
من صفة فلسطين. The question, would you be issuing a paper, what to do paper, based on constitution, what categories, precise, like one pager, and share it with all organizations to reach out to their member in order to do that? Would that be something?
Let me
Yes,
say
go
something.
ahead.
One of the things that we did with this study is to identify and to target the issues that need to be addressed, and also to see what messaging works. So the idea is that we are going to come together with one messaging, and then use that and allow the local organizations to piggyback on that. So across the country, we're using the same materials, same PR stuff, and that sort of things. Okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and Access California is part of that coalition that we will be part of the movement where we're going to be sending the same message here in California. So just stay tuned, and we'll let you know so we can have one voice together. Yes.
I've been listening to all this, and what seems to be important, I think, in the long run, if you take the long view, is to achieve critical mass. If you can get the category of MENA, whatever, and like you said, it's a step-by-step process, it takes forever. But once you get critical mass, your voices will be heard. So whatever it takes to make the Census Bureau and the administration realize that we are here, and I'm saying we because I'm married to a Palestinian, they need to pay attention to us. And if they don't, they're going to regret it. So we need critical mass. We need to speak up. We need to stand up and be counted.
Agreed. And unfortunately, it has, at least for the 2020 census, has been taken out of our hands. So now we're still trying, and we're not giving up, but we honestly, realistically, do not see that it happening. So we're now have to gearing up for 2030.
It took a lot of meetings, a lot of traveling from members of our community to be in Washington to advocate. We, on behalf of the Arab community here in Orange County, I traveled there so many times just to get the MENA category. And in Washington, ADC, AAI, Access in Michigan, everybody's working so hard to get. We had a meeting, I think, with the director of the bureau just 2 years ago with the AI, right? We were all there. So many organizations from the Arab community came together in Washington to have a one voice. But we're going to keep advocating, not fighting, advocating.
Okay. Okay, we're almost out of time, so I'm going to take two more questions, and then we'll wrap up and we'll have lunch.
Good morning. Quick question. So what is it that exactly you want us to put on the census? I know I said you say white, but when it comes to ethnicity, I guess, what are we putting there? Are we still categorizing ourselves as white, putting Arab as other, because then it won't be counted? What is it that we are expected to do? And then one more question. What kind of work are you doing in reaching out to other states, such as Chicago, New York, Michigan, where, you know, the Arab community is huge out there? And will there be ads on television and the internet to bring awareness to the Arab community to go out there and exactly what to do on the census?
Yes. Basically, what Nahla was talking about was her efforts and the efforts of the local California communities. These efforts are being duplicated in Chicago, in Dearborn, and in New Jersey, Florida, Texas, everywhere there's a major Arab population. Again, we're coming together as organizations, national and local, and we're going to be trying to put together a strategy. But we're doing it we're trying to gather as much information first. You know, for example, we have the issue of trusted messenger. Everybody says, well, if you get a famous Arab American, you know, get them out there and getting them to tell people to go out and to fill out the census, that'll work. And our studies have found, no, that won't work. They don't care what famous people say, really. Their trusted messengers are their teachers, their doctors, their priests, their imams. So those are the people that we need to get on board. So we're trying to do this in a very direct manner. So we will be coming up with a strategy, but that strategy will be done together as a unified community. Well, that's what I'm saying. That's a strategy that we're coming together that we're going to have to come up with. Well, the reason why we don't know yet, and the one thing we're trying to figure out where this administration stands on the issue of security and whatnot. There are laws out there that prevent the census from using from sharing the data with other agencies such as the FBI and DHS. We're trying to get certain assurances from this administration that they will adhere to that. So the one thing we don't want to do is to advise people of doing one thing, and all of a sudden the administration does something really, really ugly and kind of. Yes, and it'll be coming out soon. It's not like it'll come out soon. So one more question, please.
Good afternoon. I'm James Adis from Portland, Oregon. I want to follow up on the comment regarding mobilizing. It seems to me that the best way to have a voice is to somehow have publicity during elections. Well, the Arab American community, 20% of them voted for so-and-so and 20% or whoever voted for so-and-so. What kind of data are we gathering? Exit polling or something to show that we are a major voting bloc? I think that's the key to making a push. If we can show that we're a threat to congressional representatives or senators, that, especially in Michigan, where our vote, there's a huge population, it could swing the vote one way or another. What kind of data are we gathering outside of the census to show that we have a big block of voters?
So here's your dilemma. Here's the big dilemma. How many Arab Americans live in Michigan?
Over 400.
We don't know because we don't accurately counted. So one of the things that the census is important for is to go to your congressman and say, hey, here's the census. Look how many people we have in your district. You better listen to us. There are exit polls. Zugby Analyticals does a lot of this exit polls for the Arab American community. We know that look, the sad part about it is we were a major reason why George Bush won the first time, because of our communities in Florida and Ohio, major Arab American communities. And believe it or not, there was a significant number of Arab Americans, especially in Ohio and Michigan, that voted for Donald Trump. that helped him flip those states. So, so yes, the census is an important tool to use vis-a-vis this, but I think the first step we need to do is make sure that we're counted properly. Okay? Any comments or anything else? We're good? Okay, I'd like to thank our panelists for being here with us today. Thank you all. We are, give us a few minutes. We're going to be setting up for lunch. We will have lunch in this room where we'll have a discussion of community issues, what they are, identifying them, and hopefully how we can unify to address the issues on a local level. Thank you.